Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about some fire prevention tips. We'd like to thank John Andrews. He gave our book on Amazon, Home Improvement Solutions, 5 stars and a really nice review. And speaking of books, Moss and Annie, who we had on the show talking about moss, she just released a book called The Magical World of Moss Gardening. And you can check that out on her website, mountainmoss.com. In the 1920s, Fire Prevention Week was established to commemorate the Great Chicago Fire in 1871.
Wow.
So 10,000 buildings were destroyed, 100,000 people homeless, and it killed 250 people. The fire lasted like 2 days.
Really?
But the same day in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, they had a fire that killed over 1,000 people.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's weird, huh? And you never hear about that fire.
No.
And then Mrs. O'Leary's cow was originally blamed for starting the fire, but they never really determined the exact cause.
Right, because how are you going to blame a cow?
A bad cow. And then the Great Roman Fire of 64, this lasted 7 days. And Pliny the Elder, the ancient writer, I guess he talked all about it, and he talked all about Nero. Mm-hmm. And, because they always said that, Nero was playing his fiddle and watching it burn. But none of his writings survived. But a lot of his contemporaries wrote about Pliny the Elder.
So it's a conspiracy?
Yeah, probably, yeah. Half of all home fires happen between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m.
That's crazy.
And 3 out of 5 deaths are in homes without smoke alarms or the alarms weren't working. Mm-hmm. Kitchen fires are the number one cause of injuries from a home fire. And one of the biggest factors in the kitchen fires were unattended cooking. So young kids and elderly people forgetting that they have something on the stove. 50% of people injured in a kitchen fire were hurt because they were trying to put it out and the flames were just too high. Fireplaces are another big cause of home fires, and mainly because of the creosote that builds up inside the chimney.
Are you going to explain what that is?
So
or just keep plowing through?
I was going to keep plowing. But creosote, anytime we're burning wood, creosote builds up. So this is this sticky tar-like substance that's, not fully burned particles. Primarily from most of the professionals are saying if you're burning wood that's not fully seasoned, so if there's a high moisture content, you're going to have more of this residue left. And this creosote buildup, if this ignites inside your chimney, it can burn at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which will melt mortar. It'll crack tiles and actually crack the inner lining. So then you can ignite any wood.
Well, there's sparks coming out of your chimney, right?
Yeah. And they say it sounds almost like a freight train. The roar of this fire. It's so intense.
So is it just wood that we're worried about, or is it any type of logs?
Yeah, any type of log. In fact, like Duraflame.
Right.
What's nice about some of these kind of artificial logs is that these are completely dried and there's very little moisture content in there, so they burn cleaner. You've always got to worry about, whenever you're burning anything, worry about this creosote buildup. But yeah, you probably have a cleaner chimney because of like a Duraflame. But you want to have your chimney inspected at least once a year. The National Fire Protection Association says you should have it inspected by a professional chimney sweep once a year.
There are still chimney sweeps?
Oh, yeah, big business, sure. Yeah, and you should have one on your speed dial if you have a fireplace. And they're going to not only make sure it's clean, and they're not always going to have to, thoroughly clean it because they'll inspect it and they'll let you know, but they're also checking to make sure there's no cracks in your liner, which can cause a fire. Space heaters are another big cause of fire, and 50% of the deaths from space heaters were started from setting clothing or bedding on fire. So the space heater was too close to something that could ignite. Extension cords were another factor in space heater fires, and we had talked about extension cords before. You never want to use an extension cord on anything that creates heat. So space heaters, toasters, heat guns, it just creates too much heat. It melts the insulation, and then you get arcing, and then arcing, causes a fire. Candles being too close to flammable material was another big cause of home fires. Candles should be at least 12 inches from anything that burns, And the National Fire Prevention Association says that candles are 4% of all home fires and 5% of home deaths.
Wow, that's crazy.
A third of the fires that start from candles are in the bedroom because you fall asleep with them on. And over 20 home fires a day are caused by candles.
Wow.
Is that amazing? So there's a couple different reports by these fire marshals, and they're saying that do not use candles if your power goes out. Use a flashlight. And so they really emphasized, because a lot of people have, we got candles,
Right.
we'll light them if there's ever a power outage. But they say that that's one of the big problems. So you're using them during a power outage, you fall asleep, you're not used to using candles, so you have it too close to something flammable. So buy a flashlight. Spontaneous combustion is responsible for thousands of fires a year.
So not like human spontaneous combustion.
Well, actually, the first record of human combustion was Polonus Forstius in the 1400s.
Am I supposed to know who that is?
Yes, because he was the first case of spontaneous human combustion. So he was at a party consuming very strong wine and started to vomit flames,
Wow.
which set his body on fire, and it completely consumed his body. And this was a party where his parents were at, and they watched him burn to death, unable to do anything to help him.
Well, that was a cheery story.
Wait, ask. It was one of my tangents. So spontaneous combustion, we talked about like in the deck episode for staining, how linseed oil or turpentine, if you have rags and you ball them up, as the solvents evaporate, it generates heat and it creates spontaneous combustion. And so, especially in your garage, this is where you get a lot of fires. If you have rags that you're using with these solvents, make sure that you're putting them into a can with water. So you should open them up, let them dry out, and then to dispose of them, put them into some type of container and fill it with water. Another cause of fires around the house are grills, and primarily propane grills. You want to keep the grill away from the building. You want to keep it away from decks, railings, anything wood. You also want to keep it away from your vinyl siding because it'll melt it. So.
Yeah, if you're... I mean, if you're storing it after it's been used and it's cooled down by your house, that's fine. But when you're
Pull
cooking,
it away. Yep.
it's on wheels for a reason.
Right. And with charcoal grills, you never want to add starter fluid to hot charcoal because it can cause leaping flames. And then at the beginning of the season, if you have a propane grill, you can get a spray bottle with a little soap in there, so soapy water. I would turn on the grill, and then you can spray all of the fittings to see whether you get any bubbles. If you have any of your gas lines that are bubbling, just take a wrench and give it a quarter turn until it doesn't bubble anymore.
So you're not leaking gas?
Correct.
Why don't we cover the steps on how to start a propane grill?
So the key to start it is how you shut it off. You want to make sure when you're done, you want to make sure all the burners are off, and you want to turn your propane tank completely off. When you're going to start your grill, you're going to open the lid, you're going to turn on the propane tank fully open, and the key is waiting a full minute, and this is going to regulate the pressure in the regulator. So this regulator is your safety. If the regulator thinks there's a leak, then it's going to shut down the amount of gas that comes out. So sometimes when you start your grill, you only get a small flame or just a tiny flame. That's your regulator's safety, which is weird. It doesn't completely shut it off. So the key is turn your propane tank completely on, wait a full minute. Now you're going to turn your burner to start and use your igniter to start it, and then you're going to get a full flame. When you're done, then again, turn everything off.
So this applies to like fire pits that use propane tanks too?
If it has a regulator, you want to equalize that pressure. So turn the valve on fully, wait a full minute, and then start it.
So most people try and start it too fast.
Too fast. And then you get this small flame and you think it's either you have no propane or there's not enough pressure. And, a lot of people will come in and want to swap out that propane tank, but it's just the way you start your grill. Over 50% of electrical fires are from wiring or extension cords, and thousands of fires every year are from extension cords, most of them from overloading them. These indoor extension cords, the ones that you plug in and they have the multiple plugs at the end, you need to add up the total amount of amps and only use 75% of what they're rated for. And so the manufacturers are saying this, only use 75% of what it's rated for. Most are rated 7 to 13 amps.
So how do you figure this out?
So a lot of appliances you're going to be plugging in are going to have watts. So you're going to divide the watts by 120. So your household current is 120 volts. So you're going to, let's say, for example, you have a 150 watt light bulb. If you took 150 divided by the 120, it's going to give you 1.25 amps. And these indoor extension cords, these long cords, the 9, the 12-foot cords, they're really designed for temporary use.
Right.
And we spoke to a couple of the fire marshals, and they say that's one of the biggest things they see. People are covering these up with carpets, or they're tacking it to their walls, and causing abrasion on the insulation. And this is what's causing your fire.
Well, it's like my parents, when we did the extension cord episode. I mean, I know they have extension cords in there that are 20 years old.
Yeah, insane.
And
dangerous.
I was yelling at my dad, and he's just like, whoa. It hasn't been a problem. And I'm like, it hasn't been a problem yet.
Right. So if you're plugging in a lot of things and you plan on using this for long-term use, get a power strip that's rated at 15 amps, and this is going to give you the best protection against fire. If you get a plastic power strip, it's going to protect you against shocks. If you get a metal one, it's more protection against fire. So a couple of tips, if you're using these extension cords, let's say for holiday lighting, you never want to plug two cords together because this creates more resistance, which generates more heat.
You should just buy a longer cord.
Absolutely. You never want to run these under carpeting, behind walls or ceilings, and if the cords are old or frayed or crushed, just replace them. And that constant bending is what cracks them and causes them to fail. And then never use it on anything that generates heat. So for hair dryers or toasters, space heaters, never use these indoor extension cords for that. Another cause of electrical fires in your home are arc faults. So there's over 40,000 fires and 350 deaths a year because of arc faults.
Are you going to explain what that means?
So whenever electricity is jumping through the air from one surface to another, for example, like on a switch, when you turn a switch off, the contacts separate, but as they come apart, the electrons are flying through the air. They're trying to stay in contact with the other side, and that arc is what generates tremendous heat. In fact, arc faults can generate over 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and they usually will not trip a breaker. Sometimes the voltage can go down when you have an arc fault, but it generates, like arc welding, generates such tremendous heat that it's very easy to cause a fire. A lot of the problems are with loose connections, so when you're connecting your wires to a switch or an outlet, it's very important that you connect it correctly and tighten it down tight, because whenever there's a space between the wire and any metal, you get this arcing and it's generating tremendous heat. So arc faults are such a problem that in 2014, the new electrical code states, and I'll read this from the NEC code, all kitchens, family rooms, dining rooms, living rooms, bedrooms, parlors, libraries, dens, sunrooms, rec rooms, closets, halls, and laundries need to be protected by arc fault.
So they could have just said everywhere in your house?
Yeah, you'd be good at this.
To protect against arc fault, then, are we replacing the switches and outlets or the breakers and fuses?
Well, I think the best is if you have a service panel with breakers that you change into arc fault breakers. And that's going to protect the whole circuit, so whether you have switches and outlets. And your biggest problem is going to be with your wiring inside the wall, and outlets generally are where you get that with inexpensive receptacles. If you have fuses, then you can use an arc fault outlet at the beginning of a circuit.
Right.
So just like a GFCI on the beginning of a circuit is going to protect everything downstream, that's the same with the arc fault. So I think you get your best protection from the breakers. And the arc fault is going to protect you against electrical fire, any damaged electrical wiring, switches, outlets. And what's wild is the insulation on the cord or cable. If you start getting arcing, it can carbonize and catch fire. Let's say you're hanging a picture wire and you pierce a cable, which can cause arcing. Sometimes then what happens is that insulation keeps it protected, but once it starts to burn, it turns to carbon, and then it can catch on fire, which is really interesting. So this is such a big problem. Thousands and thousands of fires every year. They say that just this code change from 2014 is going to save, thousands of people's lives.
So just to be clear, arc fault protects against electrical fires, where GFCIs protect against shock.
Right. And then you can use them together. So let's say if you have an arc fault circuit breaker, then anywhere within 6 feet of water, your kitchen, your bathroom, unfinished basements, crawl spaces, garages outside, then you can use GFCIs in those locations. So now you're protected against arc fault and you're protected against shock. With most of these fires, again, 3 out of 5 deaths are because there was no smoke alarm or it wasn't working. So you want to replace your smoke alarm every 10 years. All the new research says that it's just working constantly, and after 10 years, statistically, it's just not going to do its job. And with these new alarms, you can purchase an alarm with a 10-year battery,
Right.
which is pretty cool. And so when it starts chirping to replace the battery, it's just time to replace the whole thing. The first automatic fire alarm was Francis Upton in 1890, and he was one of Thomas Edison's associates.
Nice.
It's interesting, isn't it? In 1955, the first home fire detectors were created, and all they did was sense high temperature. They cost $125 each.
Wow.
And can you imagine that in 1955? So it wasn't until the 70s where they had inexpensive battery-operated smoke detectors really became popular nationwide. So it's amazing, so recently that we really started embracing smoke detectors. And it actually, once they started in the 70s, it was just amazing how many thousands of lives were saved because of smoke detectors being cheaply available.
Well, growing up, my parents always had one in the hallway of the house, and
Right.
my mom, I guess she used to burn stuff a lot, so I can remember being sent to be the fan underneath it so the thing would stop chirping. But eventually the battery just went out, and so it was probably a good 15 years that they didn't have any smoke alarm in the house.
Nice. What's funny is the new California law, like for smoke detectors, they have a non-tamper battery.
Yeah.
So you have to have, so in 2014 they passed a law, you've got to have a 10-year battery and you can't remove it.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. The National Fire Prevention Association recommends a smoke detector on every level of your house, in every bedroom now, and outside each sleeping area. And they want you to use a combination of ionization and photoelectric alarms. So there's 2 styles. One is going to sense a fast-burning fire, and the other one senses smoke, so like a smoldering fire that's about ready to take off. The top-rated smoke alarms are Kidde, that's Kidde, First Alert, the Nest Protect, so this is that new system from Nest, USI Electric, and BRK were considered the best. For fire extinguishers, a couple of the new suggestions are replace them once every 12 years, so always put the date on it when you purchase one. Have one within 40 feet everywhere in your house, so at least one on every level of your home. And then if you have a large home, you want to be within 40 feet of a fire extinguisher. Have ABC fire extinguishers, so these are rated, A is rated for wood, paper, and cloth. B is for any type of flammable liquid like gas or cooking oil, and C is rated for electrical fires, so the chemicals they use won't conduct electricity.
Interesting.
And then we spoke to our local fire department, and they said that a 5-pound fire extinguisher is probably the easiest for homeowners to use, and you have enough chemical in there to put out most small fires. And then what's interesting, this is a routine that every homeowner should have. So if you have a basic ABC fire extinguisher with chemicals, you should turn it upside down and then right side up a couple of times, once or twice a year, and that distributes the chemical, because that chemical can actually settle and get compacted on the bottom of the fire extinguisher.
Well, we were watching a video, and the fire marshal said that it's like a pancake batter, and so if you flip it upside down,
you mix it up and distribute it.
Right.
Yeah. So what a nice routine to have once a year, and then you kind of remember where your fire extinguisher is.
Right.
If you're doing that, and it's not, that's another tip. If you have a fire extinguisher, have a place for it. And kind of go over it once a year when you do this, so that you know where it is.
Well, you asked me today where mine was, and I'm like, well, I think it's under the cabinet in the kitchen.
They also suggested a 10-pound for your garage. So 5-pound around the house, easy to handle, and then for the garage, especially for gas fires or like the spontaneous combustion, a 10-pound in the garage. One of the suggestions they use for any of the big fire extinguishers is PASS, P-A-S-S. So this is what the mnemonic device of how to use a fire extinguisher. So you want to pull the pin, you want to aim low at the fire, you want to squeeze the lever, and then sweep from side to side. And it's interesting. We're looking at a couple of the videos from these fire departments, and they were letting just homeowners practice.
Right.
And it's wild how many of the homeowners, the first thing they did was point it at the flames way too high, and that does nothing or very little to extinguish the flame. So you want to go down where the source of the flame is, so at the bottom of the flames to put it out quickly.
Well, the guy that was conducting the class was also saying you want to stay low, so all the chemicals are going up high.
Right. And then you can also get these aerosol fire extinguishers. So these almost look like just a small spray can. Some of these, like they have like the Tundra, First Alert has this aerosol fire extinguisher where you remove this plastic cap and you just press down on a button.
Right.
So very easy to use, and they actually can be used in any direction. So where a standard chemical fire extinguisher, you have to keep it upright.
Right.
With these, you can turn them upside down and use it at any angle. So those are very convenient.
What are some top-rated companies for fire extinguishers?
So Sea-Doo, it's SEA-DOO, Kidde, KIDDE, First Alert, Shield Fire, and H3R. Another cool fire extinguisher is the Stovetop Fire Stop, and this is a round canister with a fuse that sets off a reaction to release a flame-suppressing powder. So if you have flames that are jumping up, it ignites this thing. So just very cool. The little individual canisters have a magnet. So your hood vent, you just put it up into your hood vent, and it sits there waiting.
Right.
If you don't have a hood vent above your stove, then they have a bracket that holds these canisters. So it's just a very nice idea. This has a 5-year expiration, and it's just automatic.
Right.
So you don't have to worry about it.
Well, it's amazing. We've watched a ton of videos on this where these grease fires just get out of control and how quickly it ignites the cabinets above the stove.
Yeah. Fascinating. Huge leaping, which I never imagined that flames would leap that high. And this is one of the biggest causes of fires. At the last hardware show I went to, they had a booth set up from Freedom Security. So they make Liberty safes. And they were talking about fires and how important it is to be able to protect all of your important documents. They said that what you're looking for, if you're thinking about purchasing a safe or something to protect all of your paperwork, your documents, maybe collectibles or your old family pictures, you want something that has a fire rating of at least 1 hour at 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's kind of the minimum that you're looking for a safe.
I know years ago my parents had a lockbox that they kept a bunch of their paperwork in, but they never locked it.
Right.
So I don't know if that would actually help, right?
I don't know.
It was kept in the closet. It's buried in the closet. And
I think if you're buying something, you should probably get something that's fireproof.
Right, yeah.
Do
you have anything else you want to add?
I would say the key things are making sure that you have enough smoke detectors and that they're working. If you don't know how old your smoke detectors are, just get new ones, change them once every 10 years, put the date on them, and that's really going to be the basis of protecting yourself. Fire extinguishers, make sure you have enough. You know where they are.
Right.
And if you're using the chemical type, make sure you're turning it upside down a couple times once a year. What a great routine. And then you know where it's at.
Right. I would say do it twice a year. When you change the clocks, just
smart.
Deal with your fire extinguisher.
Yeah, it's great.
Let's wrap this up.
You can pick up our book, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon.
And give it a 5-star rating and review.
You can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you could subscribe to that as well.
If you want to talk to us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com. Cindy's on Twitter at FixItCohost.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.